Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back, you cosmic baddies. I'm so glad you're here. And let's get into this podcast. So I hope I have my podcasting voice on. It's like sounding very communicative. It's sounding very professional with a little bit of dose of humor. So if you guys are new here, welcome. My name is Catherine. I am the podcast host of Chakras and Cuss Words podcast, where we like to concentrate on everything spiritually in tuned. And of course, we dive deep into the astrology. This episode is part of the astrology series. You can find the whole series on my YouTube channel, Chakras and Cuss Words. And it literally goes in chronological order of all the planets, all the little asteroids, all the places in your chart that can get you feeling quite centered around the mystic of the stars. So let's get into one of our favorite constellations, one of the most popular constellations, and I would definitely say one of the most energies of zodiacs that gets the most heat, even though it's not a fire sign. It's a fucking Gemini. And can we just talk about these Geminis? Geminis, they are basically the third sign of the zodiac wheel, the zodiac calendar. They are ruled by Mercury and they are an air sign. They are also a mutable sign. They bring the curiosity and the social well-being to any type of circle. They are known for being adaptable. The Geminis are also seen as communicators, but a little bit of a trickster. They can be seen as the class clown, no doubt. I definitely feel like a Gemini had their desk out in the hallway. Like there was some point, a Gemini was definitely getting sent to the principal's office. They're very clever, and sometimes this cleverness can get them into a lot of energy of just having bold opinions. Kind of being a communicator that might feel very interesting to the collective. A lot of times you see a Gemini wooing the audience, really kind of taking up that space and saying, listen to me. Geminis are known for being centered around being intelligent. That's kind of like their key word. When you think of a Gemini, they're centered around the mind. So definitely Geminis get into that mind energy. And also they are centered around the areas of thinking and kind of like analyzing. They have an area where wisdom or speaking of wisdom or learning more just kind of comes natural to them. Their color, if they have a color, it's yellow. But I feel like a Gemini is kind of like very vibrant. And some Geminis can also be seen as kind of very professional and dark too, but yellow is known as their color. Their metal, of course, is Mercury. And their stone, if we were going to give them a stone, it would be agate. The parts of the body that they really are centered around are the mind, like I said, that analytic nature about them, but also the nerves, the shoulders, the arms, and the lungs. They are an air sign. Their vulnerabilities, when we look at that as what makes a Gemini vulnerable, I would say some are known for having like asthma and autoimmune disorders and also nervous disorders. Like, have you ever seen an anxious Gemini? It's not a cute look. It's really not. It's like they're very high focused and they're like very intense and they're like you could kind of see a Gemini who might be a little bit nervous play it off very well, but some that are very kind of like nervous, you could feel it. Like you could kind of like feel their energy. Sometimes I feel like with Geminis, you could kind of tell something's bothering them and you're like, hey, what's going on? And then they'll tell you. Because the Geminis do like to share their story. And also when we look at plants, so all of the plants, but nut-bearing plants also bring that Gemini aspect. I'm not really sure why, but there is a lot of nut-bearing plants that kind of bring that Gemini, I guess, to its magic, to its will. Also herbs, lavender and carrot. Isn't that kind of odd? But that is the herbs for the Gemini. Most people, when they think of Geminis, they think of them being curious. They also think of them being kind of like natural learners and they love to explore new things. They have a lot of questions. They want to absorb the knowledge like a sponge, just so they can regurgitate it out into their own words. Since the Gemini is very talkative and witty, they have this beautiful nature about them where people really love their communication, and they have that energy of big, thorough conversation. I could definitely see a Gemini having energy being centered around music, acting, and even social media or podcasting, right? That Gemini nature really kind of comes out where they want to get that communication out. They are adaptable, meaning that they can adapt to a lot of environments and also social groups. So Gemini won't like place themselves in one group or one energy. They kind of move around quite frequently. And also with Geminis, since they are a mutable sign, that area of versatility comes quite nice, comes a little quite nice. They have this dual kind of nature to them. When we are thinking about the twins, because that's what a lot of people say, you always hear Geminis are two-faced. Honey, shut your mouth. A Gemini is not two-faced. They just really have those two sides of them. The playful side, the intelligent side, the fun side. But then they can also be serious and deep and sometimes detached. It would be hard to have a Gemini be loyal, I would think, in some relationships because they are so playful and energetic. They're definitely fun and flirty, and they have so many ideas. Geminis are also a masculine energy. So if you are with a Gemini or if you have a lot of Gemini in your chart, you're going to want to be able to get that Gemini to express their feelings, also get centered around adventure and having deep conversations. The symbol of the Gemini is the twins, and that really represents duality, versatility, and the coexistence of opposites. The two energies of the shadows. In mythology, the Gemini is always linked to the Greek twins Castro and Pollux. One mortal, one divine. Their story speaks of how they were castaways to the sky, tying in this energy of spirituality, logic, but also deep, deep mystic legends. I will say I explained their whole story in the new moon in Gemini that I released a couple weeks ago. So if you want to hear their story, go ahead and listen to it. Listen to that podcast. Geminis in relationships are very talkative, I would say. If your Gemini isn't talkative, isn't talking to you, there might be something else going on. Geminis thrive in relationships where ideas, humor, and curiosity is shared. So it's something that you definitely want to be engaged in. They definitely do have like this energy of maybe not committing right away. So that's something that the Gemini has to feel engaged with and be mentally aligned with. They're also very centered off connection and having an area of trust, and also an area of where they feel heard, and they also feel like they can have a not just spiritual, loving connection, but also a mental stimulation. So the Gemini kind of needs like that area where stuff is changing, stuff's being talked about. They are definitely heavily emotionally in some areas of demands. So you might feel like, oh gosh, this Gemini kind of wears me out. And I could see how a Gemini could wear out their partner in certain relationships because the partner might be trying to really keep the Gemini intrigued because they do get a little bored easy. So Geminis do well with other air signs, including the Libra, the Aquarius, and of course another Gemini. Also, Geminis are known to have relationships with Aries, Leos, definitely that fire intensity. A lot of friends, I don't know how opposing signs work well together, but a lot of people that I know who are Geminis and also are Sagittariuses, they have like a good connection, the Sagittarius and the Gemini, the opposing signs. It's almost like opposites attract, and that energy of two masculines really kind of fires up, and that air kind of brings that volatility in there. So that is an energy that I definitely do see is a Gemini and a Sag. Also, there's a challenging kind of aspect in some relationships. I definitely think a Gemini might have a challenge with a Virgo, a Pisces, a Scorpio, or even a Cancer. The energy of a very root based sign might be a little bit too much for some Geminis. They might want to get out there and do some things, and they feel like they're with a sign that's very much centered at the house. The socialization just isn't there. You tend to see root signs like Virgos or like Taurus or Capricorns kind of being a little bit root based. Where you have a water sign, let's say you have a Pisces or a Scorpio with a Gemini, and you might also see that there's some challenges in areas of emotions. Like, I definitely feel like a Gemini could say some shit that would piss off their partner and just kind of be like, okay, you deal with it now. And the partner's very upset. And then when the partner expresses themselves, the Gemini might be like, because that Gemini has that energy of adaptability, where other signs may not, and especially water signs. So water signs with a Gemini could be a challenge. I'm not saying it can't work. I'm just saying there could be a little bit of a challenge, okay? So don't come for me, people, if you're a Gemini with a Scorpio. I wish you guys the best. Gemini and Scorpios are very known in the zodiac. I guess you could say, pop culture, as being two of the most hated signs. So why couldn't two of the most hated signs actually have a very beautiful relationship? It might fucking work out, if you ask me. Let's talk about Geminis and careers. So Gemini and their career, their astrology is deep. Their astrology is centered around movement. So Geminis, being multi-talented and being very resourceful, I would definitely see them having many hats, being what do they call that? A trick of all trades, but a master of none. Definitely have that area of where they're able to juggle, which is also very interesting because you can see a Gemini kind of like jump in certain situations. Definitely having many projects. When I think about famous Geminis, I think of like Tupac Shakur. He was into acting, he was into singing, he was into poetry, he was into rapping, he was into all these things, right? A social activist. He was very much centered around a lot of mental stimulation. The Geminis do thrive on that mental stimulation, so they get bored easy. And if you can't make a Gemini feel engaged, they will have a lot of challenges. They need change, they need variety, and they need fresh challenges. They also need fresh ideas. They are very pivoted on quick thinking. So it's something that, you definitely want in a career, maybe something that's always changing. I could definitely see a Gemini being good at being like a journalist, a news broadcaster, a writer, a teacher, since they have so many ideas and being very centered around communication, maybe marketing, a public speaker, technical support, of course, a singer. Geminis are known for that big lyricist attribute that they have, not really centered around the harmony of the throat like the Taurus, but the words that come out, the actor. I could definitely see a Gemini being an actor. When we look at the Gemini in astrology, the ruling planet of Mercury is all about communication, all that messenger energy, and also the energy around, some would even say like medical and health, that intellectual mindset and that technology that kind of drives everybody all together. The element of air makes them very centered around mental clarity, also social ideas, and having that drive. The modality of the mutable signs they are adaptable. They can take on challenges, but if they aren't expressing themselves, sometimes those challenges could be hindering them. And there is a flexibility about them. Geminis might say they don't want to change, but in all honesty, they will probably be the first one to change in certain areas. So let's say you have a group project, right? And everybody's in this group project. Let's say you have a Taurus, you have a Scorpio, and you have a Gemini. The group project, for whatever reason, the thesis, you guys are deciding you don't like it. It's not working out like you planned. And we're going to basically fucking throw this project away and we're going to start all over. Now, the Taurus, it's going to be a little bit hard. They might go back looking at that other project, still kind of collecting material. Like they don't see the logistics of starting all over. They're kind of like still rooted in that project. The Scorpio might be a little bit more emotionally invested in the old project, and they're like, oh, fuck, we got to start all over. Like they're really, they don't like it, The Gemini will be kind of like the first one to be like, fuck it, we just got to do it. We got to start over with it, let's do our thesis on this, kind of throwing out the ideas right away, especially a Gemini that is very much centered in that Gemini energy. The houses, the third house, when we think about the energy of the Gemini on the Zodiac calendar, the third house is centered around communication, siblings, short trips, and early education. So that energy of the inner child, the trickster of the child, we see that playing out in the third house of the Zodiac wheel. And also communication really plays out in the energy of that third wheel. So it is believed that the Gemini is exhalated in the North Node in karmic astrology. And it is tied towards a very forward-thinking approach in energies of growth. Its detriment is in Jupiter, which is quite interesting. The Gemini can struggle with being in Jupiter. The energy of faith and physical consistency really will tend to have a not so hot of a moment. It will definitely be something that kind of feels like a little bit challenging, especially in the areas of consistency and seeing where they could struggle in the big picture of having new movement. So a Gemini placement, meaning a North Node in Gemini, could feel good. It could feel very entwined in energies of karmic movement. Also, a Gemini in Mercury, or Mercury in Gemini, definitely feels very centered in an area that could move forward. But that area with Jupiter, I feel like it's just so almost like too much, too chaotic, too big. When we look at the Gemini's strengths and weaknesses, we have to remember that the Gemini is clever, quick, witty, and very sociable and adaptable. They're able to express, but some of their weaknesses or their energies of toxicity can definitely be centered around being indecisive, scattered, gossipy, inconsistent, and definitely emotionally detached. So when we talk about famous Geminis, of course, some really come to mind quite easily. John F. Kennedy Jr., Kanye West, Angelina Jolie, and Johnny Depp, of course, Marilyn Monroe. A Gemini's birthday is between May 20th to the 21st to June 20th to 21st. So definitely look at your calendar, see, your actual birth date, the time, so you can make sure you aren't one of those cusp babies that is a little confused. When is your birthday? The Gemini is the mind of the zodiac. A lot of us want to understand the Gemini. We want to get centered around the Gemini. When we think about famous singers, when I think about Kanye West, what makes him so outspoken, he definitely has some mental illness. He's definitely around pushing boundaries, being very controversial. He is definitely brilliant. He's one of the best of his trade. Unfortunately, his energy of being so unpredictable and saying so many offensive things can really tarnish his talent. He has rapid fire skills when we think about it. Like, he is very much, in some ways, a genius clustered with an area of being the mad scientist. Like, we can't deny that. He's very, very just unpredictable. And he definitely says some things that definitely offend people and offend many of his fans, where people just feel like they can't vibe with him. And it's very sad because he has so much potential, and he definitely had so much potential, but I don't know if it's a combination of mental illness or if it's just that energy of being so, I don't know. I honestly do not know anymore with him. Another Gemini is Lauryn Hill. So she's very deep, soulful, and politically sharp. She definitely expresses herself in a spiritual way. She merged rap, singing, and almost like preaching together. She has a balance of intellectual and also emotion tied into her songs. She does have that poeticness about her. Another Gemini, I guess you could say one of the Geminis who definitely has a few catchy tunes, but she also had that energy where people liked her, but they felt like there was just something very misleading about her, and that is Iggy Azalea. So she's very bold, controversial. She's also confident. She has a polished aesthetic. She's always like kind of reshaping her sound and image. High energy in a lot of her songs. You kind of feel that high energy flow. She was definitely very good at marketing, or the people who marketed her were very good at that. Also, Notorious B.I.G. So his energy of a Gemini is effortless. That flow is just effortless. It was like storytelling with this voice that was very deep and charismatic. Like B.I.G. Just amazing master of his craft. Definitely unmistakably had this voice that you recognized from areas so far away. Like, you're like, oh yeah, that's Biggie, you know. And a lot of people just loved him and loved his music. Stevie Nicks, she's a very talented, expressive, mystical, and poetic, deeply expressive Gemini. Her lyrics feel like she's casting spells. And she definitely has that witchy presence about her. While she's never acknowledged as being a witchy witch, we definitely would say that storytelling and that charisma through songs, and also like this presence of frequency that she brings to the collective, definitely ties everybody into the emotional intelligence. Another Gemini who's actually one of my most favorite Geminis is Prince. Prince, you would see that area where he kind of like had this style about him. He was known for being very gender fluid. During his time, his fashion was definitely would raise an eyebrow. And he definitely was very talented, instrumentally gifted. Prince was a musical chameleon. He definitely could play, sing, produce, write, dance. He was seen as a creative genius. He was born on June 7th, and he was also very political. He spoke up a lot against the record companies. I plan on reading his birth chart. That is definitely a birth chart I want to dive into, because he had a lot of hidden messages in his songs. A lot of people believe the song 7, oh 7, and we'll watch them fall. Boom, boom, stand in way 11, we will take them. A lot of people believe that song was dedicated to the 7 record labels. So he definitely thought outside of the box, where if you weren't tied into that mental and almost like area of having that deep analyzation of his story lyrics and his songs, you might not get the message that this messenger was given. Also, Kendrick Lamar. Kendrick Lamar is such an amazing writer. He's really an amazing storyteller. He has so many hidden windows, so many areas of lyricists that have all these different meanings. He's really able to just tell a story that has all these connections, that has all this area of gifts in all of his songs. And it definitely feels very intense when you listen to him. He feels very centered around emotion, life, and being centered around certain political aspects that move the collective together. I definitely think Kendrick Lamar holds himself because he is mentally at a different, higher level than most people. He reminds me a lot of Prince. And he reminds me a lot of Tupac in some areas, but he hasn't chose the energy of being so strong in his place of duality. Like, he sees the clarity that maybe Tupac couldn't break away from. And we'll get into Tupac a little bit more. So why Geminis are so talented as artists? I mean, let's be honest. It's the Mercury. Definitely the Mercury, the love for words and the love for storytelling, and also that area of having those punchlines and that energy of having like those ecliptic messages, those secretive messages that are very tied into having somebody mentally have like mental, I guess you could say almost like mental analyst type of nature to understand what they're talking about. They like that mental agility. They like that area where, since they are able to adapt, they want others to adapt. They want others to transform. They want others to be centered around their communication. Of course, we have Trump, who is a Gemini, with a Leo rising. And what's interesting about Trump is, I've always said, the people who hate him. The people who love him freaking crazy love him. Geminis do hold that power in communication. Communication is power. Whether it's spitting truths, whether it's rallying up a crowd, whether it's performing live, they have this connection that people want to get invested in. There's a duality about them. A Gemini can definitely drop some deep meaning behind a very playful verse about a very playful energy. Like a Gemini leader can be definitely very also, I guess you could say, challenging for the collective, because you could see them joke about something that is so deep, controversial, and almost have this like trickster energy, this joker energy behind it. And it's very much a challenge to mainstream. And when we mix it with politics, it could definitely have a strong influence where it affects the collective in many aspects. So since these Geminis are fucking some shit up, these Geminis have these fast mental reflexes and these areas of like quick decision making, and sometimes being very overstimulated, it could feel a lot for other zodiacs. That's why I'm saying that sometimes being a zodiac who isn't centered around those challenges or that area of adaptability or thought processes can see a Gemini as being too much. This sometimes can even make them extremely too clever for their own good, if that even exists, but also prone to areas of anxiety, overthinking, and nervous tension. That air energy and the nervous system and the brain activity really makes these Geminis a little bit chaotic. The arms and the hands in areas of communication. I know there are people who just communicate with their hands. I definitely see a Gemini needing to communicate with their hands, if that's being centered around writing gestures, being very expressive or using their body language. For many people, it is just natural to communicate with their hands, but I definitely see a Gemini being very expressive with the hands as well. The lung energy and the area of the respiratory system, like Kendrick Lamar, he's probably one of those rappers that I'm like, is he ever gonna? And also Eminem, where they rap extremely fast and they rap with this area of flow that's very like air driven, and they're able to have like this air control. And what's interesting about Eminem is he is also a air sign as well. He's a Libra. So Gemini's energy is very air driven, representing breath, life focus, and also conversation. So the breath work that goes behind these talents of speaking, singing, rapping, being a poet, is centered around the public speaking that the Geminis have really understood and also dived into, where other zodiacs might not have this talent quite as driven as a Gemini. They also should watch for issues like shallow breathing and sometimes lung sensitivity. So I could definitely see where a Gemini would get overzealous because they are trying to speak so much, say so much in such a closed amount of time, especially if they are under stress. So when we look at the challenges that could come up for Geminis, definitely a boredom. They could get emotionally detached. They might give a lot of inconsistency or chaotic energy, or also seen as mixed signals. There definitely could be some commitment phobia with the Geminis. No doubt about it. But their flirtatious energy could definitely drive their partner almost crazy. A Gemini definitely is charming and they're playful, and especially in communication. So I could see how having a Gemini partner might be a challenge, especially if you are not a Gemini. And sometimes the Geminis might not consciously, but unconsciously, they will cross some emotional lines and boundaries of their partners. They tend to overthink. So overthinking can be a challenge for them because they kind of want to analyze and dissect everything. And the Gemini might be upset when their partner or people that they're having communication with aren't really centered around dissecting anything. It's like, I don't know that you're upset unless you tell me. If you're sending me all these clues that you're fine, or if you're sending me all these mixed signals, but then you're telling me something else, the partner might not really understand that the Gemini is upset. In a relationships, like I said, they need that mental stimulation. They also need that area of communication. I definitely think that a Gemini that isn't expressing themselves would definitely have a hard time in their relationship if they aren't expressing themselves with talents, projects, or creativity. It would be something that would definitely make their energy a little bit more, abrupt, and also not allowing them to have that space to evolve or explore. A partner who respects their duality and respects this energy that there are definitely two sides to them can definitely have a very meaningful, loving, and charismatic relationship with a Gemini, as long as you allow them that playfulness, that humor, and that freedom to express. When we look at the energies of the chakras, there's definitely a few that stand out to me. Of course, the energy of the air sign, the throat chakra, the solar plex, and the root chakra. Also the energy of the crown chakra, the energy of balance, mind, body, and communication. The third eye, I feel like, would really enhance their intuition. So where those are definitely chakras that I would see that had a strong meaning and resemblance to the Geminis. In this story of the Aztec legend of Cotaculi, the earth goddess, she gave birth to many deities, including two twins. One was Quetzalcoatl, who was the sun god. The other goddess, Koyashaki, known as the moon goddess in some versions of Aztec history, was seen as the sister or the twin, the sun and the moon, two goddesses. Coyocacchis rebels against her mother for convincing a child and conceiving a child with no honor. The energy of this movement emerges to be a full-grown area of defense. Husi emerges fully grown and slays her in her defense of her sister. This violent cosmic birth creates the sun and the moon in an internal chase, one constantly chasing the other. The conflict between these two siblings, the conflict between these two energies of the sun and the moon, one focused on life and growth, while the other is focused on darkness, while there is the energy of honor behind it. This area shows that there is a cosmic duality between sun, moon, day, and night. It is seen as an area of being transformative and also being centered around power and engaging. Another story is in the area of the Andine mythology that is centered around the Peru and Bolivia. So it is centered in the energy of agricultural and also fertility spirits. In some Andine legends, it speaks of twins being born from sacred waters or mountain spirits, representing the energy of yin and yang, the balance of nature, rain and sun, water and land, seed and harvest. This energy brings a connection of two elements of the world connected as one, the balance of the opposites of the natural world. There is a sacred dualism in the energy of human and the energy of divine. I also speak about a lot of twin legends in the new moon in Gemini that was released back in May. So if you want to hear about more twin legends and the energy of duality in these twin stories, make sure to check out that podcast. Tupac, the master of duality, the master of the Geminis. To me, Tupac represents the Gemini of all Geminis. The energy of being a poet and also an outlaw, being a thug but a philosopher. In 1 minute, Tupac is writing raw emotional poetry about love and revolution and healing, such as the rose that grew from the concrete. And he is spitting fire about the energy of uplifting the people. And then the next minute, he's talking about violence, betrayal, pain, bitches and hoes. It is very centered around this energy of duality, that energy of peace, of coming from that cosmic connection, but also coming from the mean streets. He has songs like Keep Your Head Up, Brenda's Got a Baby, but then he also has songs that trigger others like Hit 'Em Up and America's Most Wanted. There's that energy that is feeling angry, defensive, and unfiltered in some of his lyrics. But then we also have to remember that he has a space of compassion and a higher intellectual about him. The Gemini trait of dual expression and being able to switch from being a very soft-spoken philosopher to being a fierce warrior of rap, depending on his mood. He did see that energy of having a streetwise revolution behind him. Tupac was politically charged, like that Mercury brings that fuel thinker. He was educated through his mother, Afena Shakur, who was a Black Panther, so he did have that activism piece about him. He understood that systematic oppression, but he also engaged in very much of the street violence that continued the cycle of these movements and these energies, living a life in contradiction. He was both a product and a prophet of his culture. He spoke about it all the time. The Gemini trait of understanding all sides and living in the tension between the streets and also the system was something that Tupac acknowledged, the energy of the Gemini. Also, Tupac was very vulnerable at times, and he seemed very gentle in many interviews. But then all of a sudden, he would switch into this aggressive mode where we saw that thug. Friends and collaborators, people who worked with him, often described him as being very deeply emotional, artistic, and highly intelligent. Yet he was so misunderstood, and a lot of people saw him for the things that he did rather than the things he accomplished. He often said, "I'm not saying I'm going to change the world, but I guarantee that I will spark the brain that will change the world." Could he have been the Gemini that opened up many masterminds to a new revolution? He wore many faces to him. He was seen that as that energy of duality, of speaking truth and lies. Mercury in motion was Tupac's overlying factor. Tupac moved fast. His lyrics were layered with physiological and philosophical areas that sharpened his tools. He was prolific, writing music constantly, leaving behind over 700 unreleased songs. He was seen as that energy of verbal and quite proficient speed that translated into making him one of the most legendary rappers that many people have even seen. His legacy of the twin masculine in conflict continues to rage out as the airways continue to flow his music. He was a thinker and a performer, and he gave both voice behind the rage and also the tenderness of his culture and Black America. Youth and culture and global rebellion definitely see Tupac as the legend and the ultimate Gemini as he is. I want to thank everybody for listening to this podcast. If you want to hear more about duality and twin energy, make sure you check out the new moon in Gemini. It was released back in May. Everybody have a great day. Don't forget to share, like, and comment, and send this podcast to your witchy bestie or your favorite Gemini. Bye.